Yes, so my name is Gina Eyles and I'm a children's asthma nurse. And I want to talk about asthma clinics that I've started doing in schools. Throughout the presentation, I realised when I was asked to do this presentation that actually I don't, as a health professional, talk enough about air pollution, and it's become a sort of realisation that actually we can't talk about asthma without talking about air pollution. So even from last week, when I was doing my clinics, I thought, right, I need to have conversations with these children and with the families. And so I started by just looking at asking them to do pictures while I was doing the clinics of what they understood by air pollution, or when I had to explain a little bit about what air pollution was, they then got it and then did some pictures. So there's, throughout the presentation, there's some diagrams that they've done, and also they're on the board as well. This one I love particularly. This was a child with cerebral palsy, very mild cerebral palsy, but because she, in terms of spaces for her inhaler, she needed to use a mask as opposed to, she didn't have enough strength in her cheeks to sort of hold a space like normally hold. So we were measuring it up, and I then looked down and she'd drawn this amazing picture. So this is very proud of this picture. So anyway, the whole point of this is that we wanted to address inequalities in childhood asthma, and it was a project also to improve accessibility to asthma services. So actually children are supposed to have, with asthma, are supposed to have an annual review, but because of problems with trying to get into their GP surgeries, they're not having these annual reviews. And so it's like, how can we make this easier? Children going to school every day. Let's see if we hold clinics in schools, we can improve uptake in asthma clinics, and that's exactly what happened. And also, because we wanted to address inequalities in asthma, we focused on deprived areas. Initially, it was in Norwich, and then it's now moved to North Wales. So the idea behind it was that, similarly to what Mal was saying, is that children from deprived areas are twice as likely to end up in hospital with exacerbations of their asthma, and yet these children are least likely that from deprived areas to attend their preventative asthma reviews. So we had this discrepancy between the two. So if we can marry it to the stage where children from the deprived areas are their admissions tendencies to A&E equate to those from the most wealthy, we can potentially save the NHS 8.5 million a year in England alone. And this is, sorry, some of these pictures don't really have any meaning other than they're very cute, but we just remember that pollution is bad and the NHS is here to help, but in the community we're trying to keep children out of NHS, and that's the only reason that picture's on there, is to draw them, find a link. So in terms of exactly as Jamal was talking about, there's a National Review of Asthma Deaths in 2014 found that 2/3 of children's asthma deaths were preventable if we did basic things. So if they had an annual review, if we checked their inhaler technique, if we gave them an asthma plan, these sort of things, really, really basic care, we could prevent 2/3 of the children that died from asthma. And that includes children like Ella, who Mal was talking about. I mean, that was to do with air pollution, but these are real children. Remember, these aren't just statistics. Levi in 2021, who wrote the initial report 7 years later, so only a year ago, we know better at actually preventing asthma deaths. We've still got a real problem with asthma deaths that actually are totally preventable. So one solution is a medical review, a regular medical review with personal asthma action plan, and that apparently halves the risk of hospitalisation. And it's not just about asthma reviews, asthma admissions in hospital for that year. If we get this right in children, asthma is familial, but also get it right now. We teach them the right techniques, we teach them how to manage their asthma, they have that for the rest of their lives. This isn't just at that moment. But as we're saying, families can't get into their to get their annual reviews. So asthma clinics came along to promote accessibility to asthma clinics by holding them in deprived areas of Norwich and educate families on the importance of annual asthma reviews. We wanted to make sure they have skills of management of their asthma, promote prevention, because actually treating the cause of symptoms is far more important than treating it when it's too late. Show they've got inhaler technique is effective, give them a personal asthma action plan, which is about what to do in an emergency, and really importantly, share that with the school. And what I found was the first clinic I went to, first school I went to, staff in schools didn't know a child had an asthma attack while I was there, and they kept saying, thank goodness you're here. And it was very evident that actually the training staff get on asthma isn't very good. And considering we've got 3 children, 1 in 11 children has asthma, that's 3 per class, and with staff feeling not prepared to know what to do in an emergency. So other things, and I think with this, I realised actually I really need to consider far more about air pollution, also smoking cessation and obesity support. So in terms of poverty, and again, we've got this correlation between air pollution and poverty in terms of, my thought process in terms of like really thinking about air pollution more and more. We wanted to focus on deprived areas. So we had heat maps where we had highest poverty, highest incidence of asthma, and they were the schools that we focused in on. Now, this was kind of why we proved that actually accessing schools, if we look at clinics in schools, and actually we can really make a difference to have the uptake of asthma clinics. So the first 10 schools I did, I looked at afterwards how long it had been since the last asthma review. So they're supposed to have a review every single year. When I looked, 1/3 had an asthma review in the last year, so great, they've done what they're supposed to. Another third had one maybe 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, which is very significant in terms of these children's short lives. And then another third had never had an asthma review at all. So we've got 2/3 basically of children that I saw had either not had one recently or had never had one at all, and yet they chose to come into schools to have an asthma review. So in terms of access, it seems a really, really useful venue to have these asthma clinics. And it also real significant volume of children with safeguarding needs chose to come to school. So they found that quite an accessible venue. And also tackles things like digital poverty and cost of travel. So yes, I think we can conclude that holding asthma clinics in schools really makes a difference. And this is in deprived areas where uptake is particularly challenging. So if we just remember with poverty and air pollution, more than 1/4 of all British schools and colleges are located in areas which have dangerously high levels of air pollution. So it's 3.4 million children. And the impact of air pollution alongside other environmental stresses that's not evenly distributed across society are more likely to be borne by those in poorer or more deprived communities. And this is a bit there on particulate matter. So the two, I'm probably preaching to people know far more than I do, but particulate matter concentrations across the UK are much higher than those levels the World Health Organization considers safe, and nitrogen dioxide. Latest statistics show that 86% of areas measured have levels above the legal limit. So in terms of the links I've made with air pollution, and again, this is part of my thought process of bringing air pollution far more into my brain in terms of, as a clinician, what I need to talk about, what I need to promote, is obviously poverty and air pollution coincide. There's clear signs to show that air pollutants lead to inflammation, remodeling, and increased risk of sensitization in the lungs. Issues I need to do are looking more specifically at the treatment that we use for children with asthma. So children are supposed to, the majority of children with asthma are supposed to be on a preventer inhaler as well as their blue reliever inhaler, which treats the symptoms at that moment. But what you need to do is treat the cause, this inflammatory response. And in terms of air pollution, if we can optimize their medicines so that they're well controlled in their asthma, then, so actually carbon footprint for those that are poorly controlled is 3 times higher than those than those well controlled. So actually environmentally, as well as from a health point of view, is such a really important rationale to actually get their medicine sorted. SABA, which is the reliever inhaler, is 3 times, used in the UK is 3 times that of other European countries, and pressurized metered dose inhalers, which are the blue inhalers that standard that you see, are 30% of the NHS carbon footprint. And ironically, asthma, we know, is made worse by air pollution, but the treatment that we use, the propellant that goes into the inhalers, hydrofluoroalkanes, contributes to pollution, which in the long run contributes to air pollution. So we've got this vicious circle, which actually is absolutely ridiculous. Children should have the right to breathe through them. So this is just a visual that we should definitely be doing better, and looking at these blue inhalers that give off all these harmful pollutants. So one thing is educating these children, and there's a challenge there in terms of children's understanding and families' understanding of asthma. And there's two children have now asked this: can you tell me when you use your inhaler? I said, well, my ears are sore. So this is some, now I'm just going to go through a few slides of the first 100 children that I saw. I did some sort of like research on them. So, half, basically, if you look at that, the chart on the left, 52% had their asthma well controlled. So basically half had poorly controlled asthma, and I assessed their inhaler technique. 69% had the wrong techniques. So they're not getting the if they're not using their technique correctly, they're not getting the medicines. They're then overusing their blue inhalers, having far more exacerbations, but also emitting far more pollutants into the environment. This is just, it's far more relevant to ones to do with schools, but basically I go in and assess whether they've got a reliever inhaler in school, whether they've got the correct size spacer in school, and invariably, so over here, this one on the right, 69% didn't have the appropriate spacer in school. So basically, a spacer is needed on top of the inhaler to make sure that the medicine goes down into their lungs rather than just staying at the back of their throat. And invariably, I was finding either children didn't use a spacer, which they absolutely have to, otherwise it just goes into their throats, but also they hadn't had a check for so many years, and actually they were using one that was maybe for a 2-year-old when they were 9. So again, overuse of blue inhalers, reliever inhalers, means that they're poorly controlled, so they're then ending up in hospital far more often. What we've tried to do is put them on these prevention inhalers, but adherence is such a problem that only half the amount of prevention inhalers that were expected to be used have been taken out. And again, probably this one's just for cuteness. Just that if we can, I'm trying to sort of string the pictures along, but basically, if we can enable these children to get on the prevention inhalers, they can to play football and they can do karate. So some of the medicine optimization is things that I need to work on. So absolutely it's important for the child's health. It's also important for the health of the environment. So one issue we're trying to look at is dry powders. And it's something that in adults is used far more often. They don't need any pressurized carrier to make the medicine go all the way down into their lungs. Whereas with children, because they can't take a deep enough breath, they need this aerosol, this pollutant, to actually make it go into their lungs. So ideally, we would have one dry inhalers, but we can't really in children. So it's what can we do instead? Certainly when they get to maybe 12 or older, we can. But at the younger ones, they can't take a deep enough breath, so it just ends up going to the back of their throat. But what we can do is look at alternatives to the type of blue inhaler that they have. So, for example, traditional blue inhaler is Ventolin, which in terms of emissions that pollutants that it gives off, is equivalent to a car doing 175 miles. That's one inhaler, where Salamol is equivalent of 74 miles. So in that way, even within the restrictions of what we can do with children inhalers, we can make quite considerable difference. So also I look at housing, advice on damp, mould, social prescribing in terms of letters to landlords, advice on ventilation, heating, and then in terms of, you know, I advise on external pollution, safer streets, school streets, safer streets. So it's been incredibly successful in terms of parental knowledge. The chart on the top is parental knowledge prior to clinics, and then the chart below is post clinics. And you can see that the purple indicates very good knowledge, so it's much better post clinic. And the feedback from parents has been really, really positive. So in terms of school training, this I think is, as I said, there's 3 children classed with asthma. Children, so this came from the College of Paediatricians and Child Health, reported that children feeling unsafe at school with their asthma, they don't feel supported. Parents are saying exactly the same thing. They're apprehensive about taking their children going to school with asthma because they don't feel that their support is sufficient. And teachers and school staff are saying exactly the same thing. So that became a key part of my role, is actually training as well. So I do face-to-face training with key staff, but also do the tier 1, as Mel was saying about, in terms of tier 1 training for all staff. I've now just send it out to all schools so that there's each member of staff has got an hour's worth of basic training on asthma, which I think will really significantly increase the level of knowledge across country, really. And realisation from my point of view is that I need to talk far more about air pollution and resources that are out there. So feedback from schools has been incredibly positive, and they found it, and this is in terms of selling this for the future. I think when I write my letters to the schools, I give them examples of what schools have said, as well as what parents have said as well. So we've done 12 schools so far. I think that's been very positive. In terms of funding, we've now been secured funding for a 2nd year, and that went from Norwich to North and Waverley. I'm writing it up in a journal. There's been national interest, and we're shortlisted for a couple of awards, for the Health Service Journal Awards and the General Practice Awards. What's been exciting about it is it's innovatively crossing the traditional boundaries between health and education. So it's really good to join. You know, these children aren't in silos. They go, you know, and it's about us sort of working together, and absolutely with environmental health as well. So definitely asthma clinics in schools is cool, because definitely we've improved access. It's scalable because this can get bigger and bigger and bigger. It's transferable. We can talk about other conditions as well where this could apply, and also we've improved outcomes to private children with asthma and beginning to address pollution. Right, so at the end, this is just some teaching resources, so they're not for me to present now, but there's a long list of resources that I've just put with Googling. Clean air detectives look quite fun. So then there's external guidelines for schools on air pollution, nice guidelines, etc. There's SAMI, which looks very good, honestly. Clean air for schools, really. Useful links there. So there's DEFRA alert there, Living Streets, Lungs for Lungs, Clean Air Parents Network. There more asthma in schools links, so that's more to do with asthma links in schools, emergency salbutamol inhalers. This is one solution we could have for air pollution, where we build pink aeroplanes that have rainbow emissions. Any questions?